Hello, everyone. Welcome to What Do You Believe? We're happy that you're watching, and we're happy to have Hadi and Michael.
Thanks for having
How are
me.
you guys?
Good, thank you.
Great. Ready?
Yeah,
Dr. Nagy
Yes.
Skandar. How are you, Doctor?
I'm fine, thank you. Thanks, David.
Dr. Nagy Skandar is a medical doctor, and he's the fellow of the Royal College of Surgeons of England. He practiced surgery for 25 years. Also wrote a book about creation under the microscope. You've been on many TV shows. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, David.
We've talked about geology. We're still talking about geology, and we'll
Yes.
talk a little bit more about geology.
Exactly. We are discussing the radiometric dating of rocks and fossils. And we have seen from the previous episodes that there can be a big discrepancy between things that we have seen in our time, like the eruption of Mount St. Helens, which formed canyons within 12 years. And the specimen that's sent to the laboratory showed it is between 340,000 to 2.8 million years. So it's a big discrepancy. On the screen now, we'll see false radiometric dates again on something called potassium argon. The potassium can change to argon, and that is a very long half-life. So there is a mountain Etna in Sicily that erupted in formed in 1964. And the age that was given to it is about 700,000 years. There's another mountain in Hawaii in 1800, and the age that was given is 13 to 29 million years. Another mountain in Hawaii, and that's 1801, and the age given to it 6.3 to 39.3 million years. So it's a massive difference because it depends on the rate of change and the assumptions that you calculate the radioactivity. By the way, the emission of the particles is measured accurately in the lab. That's operational science. To put it in calculation to see how long that is, this is putting lots of assumptions. So we are not against at all the work in the lab, because the laboratory shows really there are great machinery now and great calculators that we can use to detect, detectors rather than calculators, detectors that can detect the emission of radiation and the rate of the emission. That's a great work. But to come to conclusion of the age, you put many assumptions, and that's the problem.
Okay, I have a small question.
Sure.
So we have the mother element and then the daughter, and then maybe uranium is moving to lead. So if these two elements are still here, can we say that billions of years have passed? Because or these two elements are still here, but some of them are still moving.
Yeah, that's a good question. No, these elements are here because according to the creation model, they were created, but some of them are active. When you have an active molecule, it's unstable. So when it's unstable, it has to decay to become to the stability. And this radioactivity happen for different elements, really. But that doesn't mean this has changed to that. It changed potassium, it changed to argon in that very big length of time. But we have argon and potassium from the beginning, right? It doesn't mean we took that length of time to form the daughter element. The daughter element is created in itself. So that's a different way of looking at things. Yeah. I know it's a very complicated subject, David. But let me put this slide before all of us now, carbon-14, because that's the most common thing, really. Diamond is carbon under pressure. So it can form coal and it can form diamond, right? So because it's carbon, so we can use carbon-14 to measure the date. The good thing about the diamond is it's a very strong stone. So it doesn't allow contamination coming from outside. Because the problem, if you have a sample and it's contaminated by other elements, you calculate these elements in the sample, and as a result, you come to different conclusion. But diamond is a strong stone, doesn't allow contamination, which is very good, okay? So let us see what happened here. The age based on long half-life isotope dating, that's potassium argon, of the rocks containing diamonds is 1 to 2 billion years. 1 to 2 billion years in the rock that they found the diamond in. So they said if the diamond is in that rock, it must have the same age as the rock. That's the assumption. They used carbon dating. Carbon dating doesn't measure billions or millions of years at all. So if there are traces of carbon-14 in this diamond, that means it's a younger age. So the creationist scientist took these samples and sent it to see if there are traces of carbon-14. They found carbon-14 dating in 12 diamonds. The crystal structure prevent any contamination. They found that the age is 58,000 years. So let me just explain that again. They found diamond in a rock, and this rock was estimated, the age of the rock, using potassium argon technique. And they came to conclusion that the age of the rock is 1 to 2 billion years. That in itself is a big question mark. Is it 1 or 2? Billion years is 1,000 million. So is that rock really 1 or 2 billion? So the range is given. From that range itself, you know, it is not an accurate measurement because it's based on assumption. So the creationist scientists took the sample of diamond and said, okay, let us test it if there is any traces of carbon-14. So they found traces of carbon-14. That means it is only 1,000 years old. So they came to conclusion it is about 58,000 years. What I'm trying to say from here is, yeah, carbon dating and isotope measurements is based on assumptions. And because of the assumptions, you have this wide range of presenting this data. And as I said, lots of creationist Christians who believe the Bible are doing great research in this area to try to make it simple for us to understand first and to find more data that we can discuss. So this is a subject open for discussion, for further discussion. So the rate of production of carbon-14 in the atmosphere has always been the same. That's the assumptions. The rate of decay of carbon-14 to nitrogen-14 has been constant throughout time. There are good scientific reasons to think that both assumptions are false. And again, there is massive amount of work taking place. Let us just read this quote from a dating study, means human history rethink, and that was on the BBC website in Science. So this is a scientist who doesn't really believe the Bible or having any Christian views. He said a complete rewrite of the history of modern humans could be needed after breakthrough in archaeological dating techniques. So they found archaeological material and they are dating them again, and they're saying we have to rethink the whole history of human race. British and American scientists have found radiocarbon dating used to give a thorough guide to the age of a subject, of an object, can be wrong by thousands of years. So they found that the carbon dating can give us misleading figures up to thousands of years. They found that the carbon dates were wrong by thousands of years, and that the further back in time they went, the more out of date they were. That means when you measure in carbon-14 for something recent, it can give you a nearly accurate measure. If this material you are examining is really far, far away in time, the more you go backward, the more false carbon-14 will give you results. So what I'm trying to say here, in our daily discussions with other people, they say, oh, carbon-14 proved the Bible wrong. Wait a second. Let us talk about carbon-14, understand how it operates. Number two, the assumptions involved in this issue. And let us see what the scientists who have no Christian faith think about carbon-14 and the rewriting of the history of human race. There is another one. It is the tree rings. They look at the tree rings and they say we can measure the length or the age of that tree. So tree rings are real. We can see them. We can examine them in the lab. But counting one ring per year, the oldest living tree on Earth is about 5,000 years old, which is very close to the flood account. But trees can grow more than one ring per year in matters of weeks, depending on the drought and depending on the early winter, depending on environmental stress. So yes, the rings are there and we can count how many rings in a tree. But it doesn't mean it happens annually. It doesn't mean it happens every year. It happens depending on the circumstances, the environment, the water supply, the growth, lots of factors. So it's not an annual ring. It is a ring, yes, but it's not an annual ring. So you cannot calculate from that. But even if they go for annual rings, the oldest one is about 5,000 years. So let us come to conclusion to this part of our discussion about geology. We have two models. Model of millions of years of decay and death and fossilization, and then God created Adam and Eve in the garden. And we have another model that God created a perfect world and sin entered into the world, and there was death and disease and illness, and then the flood came and made all this geological change that we noticed. So there are two different models. Let me put them on the screen for all of us. So this model one, which believes that there are millions of years of life and death, and creatures are tried to grow from simple to complex by evolution methods, by natural selection and mutation. And we discovered that natural selection and mutation are not creative powers, but they believe that this is going to continue. And then with this background of fossils on the earth, God created Adam and Eve and put them in the garden.
And we've discovered that.
Sorry?
And we've discovered that, me and you, before.
Discovered what?
We've talked about that.
What?
The evolution and where did Adam and Eve came from, and the definition of the sin and stuff.
Yes, we discussed that. Yeah, we have two different views: that God created Adam and Eve perfect and sin into the world, and the idea of death and disease were there from the beginning. Right. We have another model on the other side of the screen, that God created a perfect world, Adam and Eve and all the creatures, and they were not eating each other. And we said the essential food for animals and for birds and for humans were vegetarian initially, till the flood, when God allowed eating meat. So we have the position of, or the explanation of the Garden of Eden, a perfect world, and then death entered into the world, and as a result, suffering and extinction and disease and killing and pain. And this is the fossil record, which was explained by Noah's flood. So Noah's flood explains all the events that happened after the perfect creation. That's the biblical position that we are taking, that there is a perfect creation by God, supernatural creation. We cannot test that in the laboratory, but we know that it is logical that God Almighty can create from nothing, because the first law of physics say matter cannot be created or destroyed. So matter cannot create itself. So it has to have a creator. And that's matter. Come to the life comes from life. Abiogenesis that we discussed in many sessions before. So this is the biblical description. That's a perfect world, and then sin entered into the world, and death and disease and Noah's flood. The other model, which explains millions of years of death and disease and killing, and then the creation of Adam and Eve. So if you don't believe in Noah's flood and the geology of the Noah's flood, you have to accept that God looked at the layers of the earth with all the pain and struggle and death and all of that, and say, this is very good. Because the end of the sixth day of creation, God saw what he has done, and it was very good. That's obviously not the God of the Bible.
Thank you, Doctor. Let's take a short break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Thank you for tuning in. If you have any questions or comments, or if you'd like a copy of this episode, please call 714-709-4300 or email us at info@alkarmatv.com. You can also visit our website at www.alkarmatv.com. Also, you can write to P.O. Box 3610, Seal Beach, California 90740.
Welcome back to What Do You Believe? in Doctor, we're talking about geology, and we're talking about two different models that you are clearly, you feel strongly about. They can't be mixed. You can't overlay them, or you can't try to find a middle ground. It's either or.
Exactly.
It's either it happened quickly, it happened, a lot of geology that shows that it happened very quickly, fossilization and layers and stuff like that. And then there's the other model, it happened through a lot of time, millions of years, and you've kind of explained like the two models. Can we like expand a little bit on that too?
Yes, there is uniformitarian geology and catastrophic geology. The uniformitarian geology was led really by Charles Lyell, and he wrote 3 books called The Principles of Geology, and that's the geology which is taught mainly in the universities, in the schools nowadays. The uniformitarian believes the same rate of change that we are seeing now, which is a very slow change. We don't see continents separated from each other very quickly now. We see tectonic plate movement, yes, and we see that the continents are moving slowly from each other. That's observable, right? So they say the same rate that happened in the past, the same rate that's happening in the present happened in the past, so that needs millions of years. We believe in the catastrophic geology of the flood, which things happened very dramatically during the year of the flood, the 371 days, with the volcanic eruptions, the subterranean water came out, and the crust of the earth was broken. What are the theological implications of that? If you believe in the Noah's flood, you believe that God created a perfect world, and then sin entered into the world, and as a result, decay and fossilization happened, and the geology of the flood explains most of the geological layers and the fossils now. If you don't believe in Noah's flood, you have to believe in the other part of the picture, as we see it on the screen now. We'll see that pain and suffering and death were just forming the crust of the earth, and then God created Adam and Eve. And God, after he finished his creation, he said, that was very good. I don't think God will say very good on the pain and suffering and death before the sin. Now, if you bring Noah's flood back again, you will have the perfect creation, and then you will have the fall of Adam and Eve, and then you will have the catastrophic events of the flood. And then you have to deny the millions of years that was there before. So there are 2 different models and 2 different starting points. And you have to examine which one is the logical one, which one is the true one that you want to believe in. And that's what do you believe, really. And as I said, this type of science is based on the starting point, because you cannot test that in the laboratory. Let me just bring that to a sort of conclusion. Which is your authority? Is your authority the infallible word of God? Do you believe that the Bible is the infallible word of God and God's revelation of his plans through history and events that happened in time and place? Or do you think that the Bible is just a moral book helping us to have good life without really understanding that's embedded in history? That's a big difference. And then the other starting point for people is fallible opinions of sinful men who come with the uniformitarian idea, and they keep changing the dates. And these dates are changing all the time. And we have seen the fallacies of carbon-14 measurement and for radioisotope measurements. So which is your authority? I'm not saying the Bible is limiting us in thinking. That's the opposite completely of what I'm saying. Because the Bible is allowing us to think, because there is a designer, we can go and find more about what he had designed. I like an author called John Lennox, who was a professor of mathematics in Oxford, and he gave a lovely example. He said, Mr. Ford, who designed the car, there is no competition between Mr. Ford and the car at all. As we discover the mechanics of the car more and more and more, we appreciate the mind of Mr. Ford who designed the car. So I think that's a good example. When we examine the universe that we live in and discover how fine-tuned the universe is, we can think of a great God who's a creator. This didn't happen by chance and time and laws of nature. We'll discuss the Big Bang and other things later, but let me just mention something very interesting. When you speak to people who believe in the Big Bang and the chances of forming the universe by chance, and say the universe is fine-tuned. The distance of the Earth to the sun is really measured properly, and if we come nearer to the sun, we'll get burned. If we go away, we'll become very cold. The distance of the moon to the Earth is very important because it allows the tide, and the tide allows the water to move, otherwise be stagnant, and there will be no marine life at all. So when you say the fine-tuning, do you know they came with a lovely, not a lovely idea really, but another idea. They say there is multiverses. It's not universe, it's multiverses. Multiverses as if there is a machine producing endless number of universes. One of them by chance will be right. I would rather really
Be right?
One of the multiverses theory
Will be right.
one of them by chance
Will
will be
work
with
out,
the
like,
right
yeah.
distances.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
you're fine-tuned, I mean,
Mhm.
right? So instead of accepting that God and there is a designer who made all of that, they come with the idea saying there is multiverses. It's not universe, it's multiverses. So as if there is no machine that nobody can discover, producing endless number of universes. By chance, if you have millions and billions of them, by chance one of them will be
The right
fine-tuned.
one that we're in. Mhm.
Exactly. So there is a two. Who is your authority?
But doctor, like we have to be honest a little bit.
Yeah.
It's harder to believe in something that you can't see.
Yes.
So we're trying to explain something that we can see right now, the development, you know, the earth, the animals, the life, and we're trying to make sense of it. So
Yes.
I believe it's harder to try to figure out that there's some power out there, a God that made all of this with a word. Because logically, how can I explain that? But we've been going through the episodes to kind of try to say that what we see today in biology and geology, and we're going to move into astronomy, can be explained by this idea of a God that created everything by all these events that happened,
Yeah.
and created all of that. But again, if you can touch about just like, because you're talking about like two different ideas, two
Yes.
different ways to think about this.
Absolutely.
And I just believe it's hard. It's hard to pick, and,
Yeah.
and I believe that most people don't pick. You know, you just live,
Right.
you know, through your life because it's hard. You know, we're sitting here and we're trying to talk about it, but
Yeah.
we don't really understand everything and what's going on.
Yeah. But we understand the basics. What I'm trying to say here, there is a lovely book called "I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist." An atheist, because atheist starts with a big faith that matter is all what exists, and life can come from no life. That needs a massive amount of faith. It needs really a massive, and it's illogical and it's non-scientific. But when you say life comes from life, that makes sense, and that's the creation model. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. I told you the story of this atheist who came to say to me, I know who you are Nagy, Eskandar, you believe in creation, I'm not going to shake hands with you. That was his introduction. He said, welcome. And we started chatting for a bit of time. So I said, if you don't have this starting point, your starting point is, in the beginning there was nothing, and nothing had exploded and formed everything. That's the atheist view. In the beginning there was nothing, and nothing exploded and formed everything. I have a better starting point. In the beginning, that is the time, God, the source of power and energy, created heaven and earth, space and matter. So this is more scientific than in the beginning there was nothing and nothing had exploded. So in the 18th century, when the idea of the uniformitarian starts to be very widespread by Charles Lyell and others, they came to this picture that I'm going to show on the screen. Rocks of millions of years. But there is no evidence of millions of years, as we said. They said the rocks are millions of years. And they brought it to the theologian and say, oh, we have millions of years. So the theologian didn't question the idea of uniformitarians. They didn't explain the geology of the flood. And they said, okay, we'll take these millions of years and insert them in the Bible. So they tried to put it between verse 1 and 2. They say, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth, and the earth was void and shapeless, and there was no life, and the water covered the globe. So they said there was a destruction, and we can put the millions of years in that particular section, and there will be dinosaurs and everything. That was nothing really. The language doesn't allow us to do this, and there is no evidence of this called gap theory. So who is your authority? Really, back again to this slide. Who is your authority? Is it God your authority, or the fallible man is your authority?
Okay, so doctor, you're trying to kind of change everything around with the terms, with the facts, because now you're saying that believing in God is more logical than believing in the theories or the other ideas, and it's hard because that's not what we've learned for years. So thank you for being here. Thank you guys for the discussions.
Thank you.
C.S. Lewis said, "Faith is the art of holding on to things your reason has once accepted, in spite of your changing mood." What is your faith? Ask yourself, what do you believe? Thank you for watching.